From the outside, our life looked enviable. People would glance at us during dinner parties and whisper words like perfect or lucky. Daniel, with his polished charm and effortless confidence, made every room brighter. I played my role flawlessly, too. The loving wife, the gentle smile, the quiet strength beside him. Together, we were a picture carved for admiration, framed in gold. But frames can hide cracks. Photographs never reveal what happens once the flash fades. I used to believe that what we had was real, that our love was built on unshakable ground. But even in those early days, shadows lurked at the edges of our home. It started small, Daniel coming home later than usual, blaming traffic or endless meetings. I laughed it off, told myself it was normal. Men with ambition always carried heavy schedules. I wanted to believe his excuses because the alternative, that he was lying, was too heavy to bear. Our house was a quiet cathedral most nights. The ticking of the clock in the hallway echoed against the silence of empty rooms. I'd pour wine for two only to drink alone. When Daniel did return, it was often with a distracted smile, his phone glued to his hand. He'd kiss me on the forehead, his lips cold, his eyes somewhere else entirely. The phone calls became the first real fracture. He'd step out to the balcony at midnight, whispering into the dark as though the shadows themselves demanded secrecy. I told myself it was work, but his laughter, low, intimate, too tender for colleagues, told me otherwise. Sometimes when he caught me listening, he'd turn sharp, eyes narrowing in a way that made my stomach twist. But I stayed silent. Silence felt safer. If I pushed too hard, maybe the fragile image we'd built would shatter, and everyone would see. And yet in the quiet of my own mind, the questions grew louder. Why did he smell faintly of perfume that wasn't mine? Why did his shirt sometimes carry creases as if someone else's hands had held him too long? Still, when neighbors waved and admired us, I smiled and waved back. Because betrayal, I was learning, doesn't announce itself. It slips into your life quietly, hiding behind every practiced kiss, every staged laugh, every photograph that pretends to capture joy. One night, as I lay in bed, Daniel sighed cold and untouched. I stared at the ceiling and realized something simple, terrifying. Perfection is always a mask, and masks are meant to fall. That thought lingered in me like smoke, filling my lungs, refusing to leave. I didn't know it then, but the mask would not just slip. It would rip away. And what lay beneath would change everything I thought I knew about love, about trust, about the man I called my husband. The nights grew longer after that realization, that perfection was only a mask. Every glance at Daniel now carried weight. Every word he spoke balanced on the sharp edge of doubt. He was still my husband, still the man who held my hand at crowded dinners, but something in his eyes had shifted. A coldness lingered there, like a locked room I would never be allowed to enter. It started in the bedroom. Daniel used to reach for me without hesitation, his warmth filling the empty spaces between us. But now he often turned away, claiming exhaustion, his body curled at the edge of the mattress. The sheets became a quiet battlefield, his silence pressing against my restless thoughts. I tried to brush my fingers along his back once, searching for closeness, but he stiffened and muttered, "Not tonight, Emily." The rejection cut deeper than I wanted to admit. During the day, his behavior shifted too. The way he looked at me, sharp, assessing, as though I were the intruder in our own home. And then there was the phone, always in his pocket, always face down when he set it on the table. At night, he'd take it into the bathroom, the door locked, water running to mask his voice. When I asked who he was texting, he smiled thinly and said, "Work, always work." One evening, I reached for it while he showered. The screen lit up, but a password blocked me out. My heart sank. Daniel never used to lock his phone. My hands shook as I set it back before he emerged, towel slung low on his hips, his expression unreadable. For the first time, I wondered if he could see the guilt written on my face, guilt for wanting to know the truth. When I finally confronted him, it was clumsy, desperate. "Why the lock, Daniel? What are you hiding from me?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze pinned me like a blade. Then with a slow, calculated smile, he replied, "Don't you trust me? After everything I give you, this is what you ask?" The words weren't loud, but the weight of them crushed me. He made it sound like I was the one destroying us, like my suspicion was the crime. That night I lay awake beside him, torn between trust and fear, unable to silence the echo of his cold stare. And yet, deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. A locked phone was never just a locked phone. It was the first thread unraveling, one that would soon pull apart everything I thought I knew about Daniel. The unease from Daniel's locked phone clung to me like a shadow, following me through every corner of our home. I told myself to stop digging, that suspicion would destroy me more than the truth ever could. But suspicion has a way of feeding itself. It demands proof, even when proof cuts like glass. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. Daniel left early, saying he was flying out for a 2-day business trip to Chicago. His words were polished, rehearsed, as if he'd been waiting for me to ask where he was going. I kissed him goodbye, watching him drive away, his suitcase in the trunk. Later that afternoon, as I was tidying the study, I found it. A crumpled receipt tucked between papers on his desk. The logo at the top was unmistakable. A luxury hotel only 40 minutes from our home. My breath caught. The date was from the previous week. The room was for 2. I stood there frozen, the paper trembling in my hands. The walls of our house seemed to close in, the silence louder than any scream. My heart pounded with the kind of dread you can't run from. And yet, when Daniel returned 2 days later, smiling, suitcase in hand, I forced myself to wait. That night, as he undressed, I held up the receipt. Chicago? My voice was sharp, breaking the quiet. Or the Grand Weston? He didn't flinch, didn't stammer. He simply smirked, as if I'd accused him of forgetting to take out the trash. "You're really going through my things now?" he asked, slipping into his shirt as though the question of his betrayal was nothing more than an inconvenience. "It's dated the same night you said you were at a conference. Who were you with, Daniel?" His eyes hardened, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "You hear yourself? You sound insane, Emily. Do you think I'd risk everything for some fling? This," he snatched the paper from my hands, "is just business. A client dinner ran late. You should know better." Gaslight. Sharp and precise. He turned the accusation back on me, painting me as paranoid, ungrateful, even cruel for doubting him. And though the evidence burned in my mind, his tone made me question my own grip on reality. I lay awake long after he drifted into sleep, his breathing steady, mine shallow. The receipt was gone, but the lie remained, lingering like poison. And then, days later, someone knocked on our door, a stranger with eyes that knew too much. The knock came 3 days after the receipt incident, just as the weight of Daniel's lie still pressed against my chest. I opened the door expecting a delivery, maybe a neighbor. Instead, a woman stood there, mid-30s, sharp features softened by exhaustion, eyes shadowed like she hadn't slept in days. "Emily?" she asked, her voice steady but strangely intimate, as though she already knew me. "Yes," I answered cautiously. She glanced over her shoulder before leaning closer. "My name is Claire. I knew Daniel, intimately." The world tilted. Her words fell like glass shattering in my ears. I wanted to slam the door, to tell her she had the wrong house, the wrong man. But something in her expression, a mixture of pain and warning, froze me in place. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, gripping the doorframe. She gave a humorless smile. "That's what I said once. He makes you believe you're special, that you're the only one. But Daniel's not who you think he is." Before I could answer, the sound of Daniel's car pulling into the driveway cut through the air. Panic flashed across her face. She shoved a folded note into my hand. "Read it when you're alone," she urged, before hurrying down the street like a ghost fleeing daylight. I stood frozen, note burning in my palm, as Daniel walked in with his usual smile. "Who was that?" he asked casually, setting his keys on the counter. "A neighbor," I lied, slipping the paper into my pocket. My voice trembled, but he didn't seem to notice. That night, long after Daniel fell asleep, I unfolded the note beneath the dim glow of my bedside lamp. Claire's handwriting was jagged, desperate. "He lies. He hurts people. Check his past. Don't let him do to you what he did to me." My chest tightened. Every doubt I had, every suspicion suddenly felt justified. Claire wasn't just a bitter ex. Her warning carried the weight of lived fear. But what had Daniel done to her? What was he hiding? The next morning, I tried to study Daniel as he read the paper and sipped his coffee. His movements were practiced, his smile rehearsed, and yet I couldn't shake the image of Claire's haunted eyes. For the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home, living with a man whose secrets had begun to leak through the cracks of his carefully crafted life. I made a silent vow then. If Daniel wouldn't give me the truth, I would find it myself. No matter the cost, Claire's note haunted me for days. Every word echoed in the quiet corners of the house, stirring doubts I could no longer suppress. If Daniel had secrets, they were buried somewhere close. I only needed the courage to dig. One afternoon, when Daniel was out on another meeting, I wandered into his office. It was the one room I rarely entered. His sanctuary, he called it. Papers stacked neatly, books arranged with unnatural precision. The smell of his cologne lingered in the air, sharp and suffocating. At first, everything looked ordinary. But then my eyes fell on the mahogany desk. A drawer on the left side had a tiny brass lock. Tried pulling it, but it didn't budge. Locked. My pulse quickened. Why would Daniel lock a drawer in his own home, hidden from the wife he claimed to trust? I searched frantically through the office until I found a small key in a box of old stationery. My hands trembled as I slid it into the lock. The click of it opening sounded louder than thunder. Inside were files, thick envelopes stuffed with documents, bank statements under names I didn't recognize. Driver's licenses with Daniel's photograph but different identities. Richard, James, Michael. Passports too, tucked into a leather folder, each with different birthplaces, different lives. And then, worse than the false names, were the photographs. Women smiling in candid snapshots, some in cafes, some on beaches, others in dimly lit apartments. I didn't know their faces, but the intimacy captured in those frames made my stomach twist. These weren't strangers to him. They were pieces of his hidden life. A chill spread through me as I sifted through each picture. Were these women ex-lovers? Victims of his lies? Claire's words clawed back to me. Don't let him do to you what he did to me. The air in the office grew heavy, suffocating, as though the walls themselves knew the truth before I did. I closed the drawer, relocking it, returning everything as it was. But the images burned into my mind couldn't be erased. When Daniel returned that evening, I forced a smile, poured him a glass of wine, and pretended nothing had changed. Yet inside, everything had. That night, lying beside him, I realized the truth with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. I hadn't married a man. I had married a stranger who wore masks, and I had just peeled one away. The drawer's contents stayed with me long after I locked it again, haunting every thought. At first, I told myself not to overreact. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. But the faces in those photographs, the false identities, the hidden accounts, they gnawed at me. Claire's warning rang louder now, each word tightening around me like a noose. I couldn't sleep. Night after night, I replayed the images in my head. The names on the bank accounts, the passports, the women. I needed answers, and I could no longer wait for them to fall into my lap. I turned to the only thing I had, the internet. It began with the simplest search, the name of the hotel from the receipt. A string of articles appeared. Police reports, missing person notices, whispers in local blogs. Women disappearing. Faces eerily similar to the ones in Daniel's hidden photographs. My hands shook as I clicked through the pages, piecing together fragments like shards of broken glass. One woman, Jessica, vanished after leaving a corporate event. Another, Lisa, was last seen outside a downtown bar. Both cases unsolved. Both connected to locations Daniel had once claimed to visit for work. The pattern was undeniable. Wherever Daniel's lies placed him, shadows followed. I scribbled notes in a hidden journal, mapping timelines, cross-referencing his trips with the disappearances. The lines began to overlap with chilling precision. The man I had married wasn't just a liar. He was something far darker, something I struggled to even name. During the day, I forced myself into routine. I smiled when he looked at me, poured him his coffee, kissed him goodbye. But beneath it, I was unraveling. Every time the phone rang and he stepped away to answer it, I felt my stomach knot. Every time his eyes lingered too long, I wondered if he could see the truth flickering in mine. One night, unable to resist, I returned to the drawer. I pulled out a small envelope tucked at the back. Inside were driver's licenses belonging to two of the missing women I'd read about online. Their photographs stared back at me, hollow now with the knowledge of their fate. My breath caught, my vision blurred. I dropped the envelope, hands trembling. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't paranoia. Daniel was tied to these women, intimately, dangerously. I shoved everything back, locking the drawer once more, my body cold with fear. Lying in bed beside him that night, I couldn't close my eyes. His breathing was steady, peaceful, as though he were the most ordinary man alive. But I knew better now, and as I stared into the darkness, one thought consumed me. If women connected to him disappeared, what would happen when he realized I had discovered his truth? The silence between us had grown unbearable. Every glance, every touch carried the weight of secrets I could no longer ignore. The evidence in the drawer burned in my mind. The missing women's faces haunted me. Fear whispered for me to stay quiet, but fear also told me that silence would kill me. One evening, as the sun bled across the living room, I finally spoke. My voice was steady, though my hands shook beneath the table. "Daniel," I said, staring at him, "who are you, really?" He looked up from his glass of whiskey, brow arched, amused. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind I need answered." I reached into my pocket and slid a photograph across the table, one of the women from his drawer. "Do you know her?" For a flicker of a second, something shifted in his eyes. Then he smiled, slow and deliberate. "Ah, you've been snooping." I swallowed hard. "Don't turn this on me. Who are these women? Why do you have fake names, fake accounts? Why—" My voice cracked. "Why the lies, Daniel?" He leaned back, taking a long sip before answering. His tone was maddeningly calm, almost tender. "Affairs, Emily, that's all. I wasn't proud of them, but men, we slip sometimes. I kept things hidden to protect you. Isn't that what you wanted? To be protected from the ugliness?" The words sliced through me. Affairs. He made it sound so trivial, so forgivable, as though the shattered glass of my trust could be swept neatly under the rug. "You expect me to believe that?" I demanded, my voice sharper now. "What about the missing women? The ones who vanish after your trips?" His smile faded, replaced by a cold stare. "Careful, Emily, you're walking into dangerous territory. You're letting your imagination poison you. Do you want to ruin us with paranoid fantasies?" The air thickened. His calm was more frightening than anger. He didn't raise his voice, didn't strike me, but his presence alone pressed against me like a threat. For the first time, I realized the balance had shifted. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was prey, cornered in my own home. I nodded faintly, feigning defeat, while inside terror gnawed at me. He believed he had silenced me, but I knew now I couldn't stop. I needed help, proof. A way out before the mask he wore slipped entirely, and then, as if fate had heard my silent plea, help came, from someone who had been watching Daniel all along. The confrontation with Daniel left me shaken, but it also left me with something else, clarity. I could no longer fight this battle alone. And as though fate had answered my silent desperation, a stranger appeared the very next morning. I was walking back from the market when a man approached me. Mid-40s, plain suit, eyes sharp yet not unkind. He spoke my name softly, careful not to alarm me. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Emily," I froze. "Yes?" He slipped a card into my hand. "Detective Harris." His voice dropped to a hushed tone. "I've been looking into your husband for years. You need to be careful." The words nearly buckled my knees. I followed him into a quiet corner of the cafe across the street, my pulse racing louder than the clatter of cups around us. Harris leaned in, his tone heavy with secrets. "Daniel isn't who you think he is. He's been under investigation for fraud, money laundering, and possibly worse." His paws hung like a blade. "Murder? Several women tied to him have disappeared. We've never had enough evidence to make it stick. He's clever, always one step ahead. But you—" his eyes fixed on mine. "You might be the key." My stomach twisted. "You're saying my husband killed them?" Harris didn't flinch. "We can't prove it, not yet. But you've seen things, haven't you? You wouldn't be sitting here otherwise. Images of the photographs, the false identities, Claire's haunted warning. They all collided in my mind. My hands trembled as I clutched my coffee cup, trying to steady myself. "If I help you and he finds out, you'd be in danger," Harris admitted. "Which is why you need to be smart, careful. Any detail you can share, no matter how small, could be the break we need." But understand this, Mrs. Whitmore. If you stay silent, you may not get another chance. The weight of his words pressed down on me. I thought of Daniel's calm stare, the threat in his smile, the way he made me feel like prey. Harris was offering a way out, but it came at a cost. My safety, maybe even my life. As I walked home, Detective Harris's warning echoed louder with every step. And when I opened the front door to find Daniel already waiting, smiling as though nothing in the world was wrong, I realized the danger was no longer at a distance. It was sitting in my living room. Daniel's smile greeted me as I stepped through the door, but it didn't reach his eyes. They followed me with a predator's patience, sharp and unblinking. My heart still pounded from Detective Harris's warning, but I forced a brittle smile, setting down my bag as though everything was normal. "Rough day?" he asked casually, swirling the last of his drink. I nodded, pretending calm, though my skin prickled with the sense that he already knew more than I wanted him to. The air in the room was taut, stretched like glass about to shatter. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps against the door, urgent. Daniel's expression darkened instantly. "Stay here," he muttered, striding toward the entrance. But I followed, silent, my breath shallow. When he opened the door, I froze. Claire, her face pale, her eyes wild with desperation. She tried to push her way inside. "We need to talk now," she demanded, voice breaking. Daniel's jaw clenched, his smile vanishing. "You shouldn't be here." The argument erupted in an instant, his voice low and seething, hers ragged with fear. I couldn't make out every word, but fragments cut through. Lies. Women. Danger. Claire's voice grew louder, trembling with both rage and terror. Then everything happened too quickly. Daniel's hand shot forward, grabbing her by the throat, shoving her violently against the wall. Claire gasped, clawing at his arm. I screamed, the sound tearing out of me, but Daniel didn't flinch. His face was a mask of cold fury, eyes empty, as though he'd done this before. There was a struggle, a flash of something metallic. I couldn't tell if it was hers or his. And then the sound that still echoes in my skull, a dull, sickening thud. Claire crumpled to the floor, blood blooming across the polished hardwood like a terrible spreading flower. I stood frozen, phone clutched in my hand, but useless. My legs refused to move, my voice strangled in my throat. Daniel turned slowly, his chest heaving, his hands slick with red. And then he looked at me, not as a husband, not even as a man, but as if I were the next problem he needed to solve. For the first time, there was no mask left. No charm, no excuses, no tender smile, just the monster behind the man. And as Claire's blood darkened beneath us, I realized that the vows I once clung to had been shattered forever. The living room still smelled of blood. Claire's body had been dragged out of sight, but the crimson stains seeped into the wood, stubborn, permanent. I sat frozen, phone hidden in my lap, while Daniel paced like a caged animal, muttering to himself. This wasn't supposed to happen," he hissed, raking his hands through his hair. His shirt was spattered with dark red, his face slick with sweat. She forced me. Always forcing me. Just like the others, the words made my chest constrict. The others. My thumb hovered over the record button. Slowly, quietly, I pressed it. Daniel's voice grew louder, angrier, the walls amplifying every syllable. "Do you think I wanted this life, Emily? You think I wanted to lie to hide? No, they made me. Every one of them. Weak, greedy women who thought they could trap me. I gave them everything and they still weren't satisfied." His rage spilled out unchecked, a storm of confession disguised as justification. He admitted to affairs, to manipulation, to driving women away, his tone slipping between arrogance and venom. And then chillingly, his voice dropped into something darker. "Sometimes," he whispered, staring at the floor as though seeing ghosts, "the only way to silence them was to make them disappear." I swallowed hard, forcing my body to remain still while my phone captured every word. My hands trembled, but I couldn't let him see. He turned suddenly, eyes blazing. "And you, Emily, you should be grateful. I chose you. I could have left you like the others, but I didn't. Do you understand what that means?" His words landed like chains, binding me to the monster he truly was. My vows echoed in my mind, for better or worse, in sickness and in health till death do us part. How grotesque they felt now, twisted into a contract of survival. But beneath my terror, something hardened. I wasn't his possession. I wasn't his next victim. I had proof now, burning in the small device hidden in my hand. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of control. That night, as he finally collapsed into uneasy sleep, I slipped into the hallway, my heart pounding. The recording was safe, and tomorrow, I would find a way to hand it over. The recording never left my hand. I carried it to Detective Harris the next morning, my body running on adrenaline and dread. When I pressed play in his office, Daniel's voice filled the air. His rage, his confession, his arrogance. Harris leaned forward, his jaw tightening with each word. For the first time, I saw relief in his eyes. "This is it," he said firmly. "This is the break we needed." What followed unfolded with a surreal swiftness. Warrants were filed, arrests planned. And just days later, Daniel Whitmore, the man who once slipped his arm around my waist at dinner parties, who neighbors called a perfect husband, was led away in handcuffs. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted his name, but Daniel wore that same calm smile, as though the world still belonged to him. The trial became a spectacle. Headlines screamed about the double life of Daniel Whitmore. Documentaries previewed exclusive insights. The courtroom itself felt like a theater, every seat filled with people hungry for truth, or perhaps scandal. I sat in the witness stand, my hands shaking as I replayed the recording. His voice echoed across the courtroom, the mask finally ripped away for all to see. The prosecution painted him as a predator, a master manipulator who used charm as camouflage. The photographs, the false identities, the missing women, piece by piece, the puzzle assembled into a horrifying whole. But Daniel never faltered. He smirked at me from across the room, his eyes daring me to keep going. He confessed to affairs, admitted to fraud, but denied violence with chilling ease. And yet the evidence, my evidence, cut deeper than his denials could cover. When the verdict came, the room fell silent. Guilty. The word thundered through me, both a release and a wound. Justice had been served, but victory felt hollow. Because no verdict could erase the scars, the nightmares, the memory of blood on our living room floor. In the weeks that followed, the world consumed his story, dissecting every detail of his double life. To them it was entertainment. To me it was survival. I carried the weight of every vow broken, every lie believed, every moment of silence that had nearly cost me my life. And at night, when the noise faded, I was left with myself, a woman free, but forever marked. The verdict echoed in my mind long after the courtroom emptied. Guilty. The word should have felt like salvation, but instead it lingered like a hollow bell tolling for everything I had lost. Daniel was gone. Not dead, but erased from my life in chains. His charm now reduced to headlines and cautionary tales. Yet even with him locked away, the silence he left behind pressed harder than his presence ever had. The house became unbearable. Every room whispered of him, the chair where he once sat with his whiskey, the balcony where he whispered into the night, the bedroom where I once believed we were safe. I avoided mirrors because they showed me someone I no longer recognized, a woman aged by secrets, scarred by truths she had begged never to learn. At night, I replayed our wedding vows in my mind. His steady voice, his confident smile, my trembling yes, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. They had felt eternal then, a promise carved into the marrow of my bones. But now I saw them for what they had been, lies wrapped in lace and gold, a mask worn long enough to trap me in a dream I mistook for love. The ultimate betrayal wasn't the blood, or the lies, or even the danger he brought into my life. It was the illusion itself, the belief that I was cherished, chosen, safe. He had built me a world made of glass, and when it shattered, I realized I had been walking barefoot all along. People congratulated me for surviving, called me brave, whispered words like strong and resilient. But they didn't see the nights I lay awake, listening for footsteps that would never come, fearing shadows that no longer had his name. They didn't see the scars beneath my skin, carved not by his hands but by his deception. And yet beneath the wreckage, I found a truth that belonged only to me. Survival was not victory, but it was enough. Enough to breathe, enough to move forward, enough to choose silence not as submission, but as freedom. I walked out of the house one last time, leaving the ghosts behind, and felt the night air cool against my skin. The silence followed me still, but this time it was mine to keep.